The courtroom burst into laughter the moment I stood up to represent myself until I pulled out my bar license and reminded them I passed the exam before I turned 17. They thought I was just another poor black kid with no lawyer. What they did not know is that I am the lawyer, and I came to dismantle everything they thought they knew about justice. Keep watching, because this is not just a case, it is a reckoning. That day, they brought this boy in here with no lawyer. Someone in the back whispered, but loud enough for everyone to hear. The judge glanced over his glasses, trying to mask the smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. The bailiff shook his head. Arms crossed. A few attorneys in tailored suits exchanged glances. Stifling laughter. Ladies and gentlemen, we might be in for some entertainment today. One of them muttered, flipping open his notepad like it was a comedy show. And me. I stood alone at the defendant's table. 17. Wearing a borrowed suit one size too big. My mother's trembling hand having pressed it into mine just that morning. The knot in my tie was crooked, but my spine was straight. I looked around the room, heart pounding, as they laughed. Grown adults, people sworn to uphold justice, and all because I had no lawyer standing beside me. They had no idea. I am Elijah Jones. 17. From East Side Detroit, where sirens sing lullabies and dreams do not make it past the corner store. My mother raised me on $10.35 an hour, working 2 nursing home shifts back to back. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment where the heat barely worked and the ceiling leaked in the winter. I did not grow up thinking I would be a lawyer. I just grew up wanting not to die. Books became my escape. While kids on my block shot hoops or got shot, I sat in the public library reading the Constitution, line by line, because I did not trust the system to ever read it for me. But nothing prepared me for this. 3 weeks ago, they accused me of vandalizing a police cruiser during a protest I never attended. Said my face matched grainy security footage. Said a kid like me probably had it in him. No lawyer wanted to take the case pro bono. One even laughed and told me to plead out. Get it over with. So I did not get angry. I got ready. I spent every night in the law library downtown. I read every Michigan statute, every procedural requirement. I learned what motions I could file, even what case law supported my side. I did not sleep. I barely ate. But when I stepped into that courtroom, I was not a scared kid. I was a storm. The judge cleared his throat. "Ma, Jones," he said, barely containing a chuckle. "You have waived your right to legal counsel and chosen to represent yourself." I stood up. Voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor." He blinked, surprised by the lack of hesitation. "Are you sure you understand the consequences of that decision?" I looked him in the eye. "Better than most." The courtroom chuckled again. "Very well," he said sarcastically. "Let us proceed. State, begin your case." The prosecutor swaggered to the center, flipping pages like he already won. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter," he said with exaggerated confidence. "We have surveillance footage of the defendant at the protest site, near the vehicle in question. We have testimony from Officer Danvers who had D him, and we have motive. His prior social media posts suggest strong anti-police sentiment." He smiled smugly, walking back to his table like the case was closed. I stood. "Objection. Your Honor, that last part was speculative and prejudicial. The judge raised an eyebrow. Sustained, he said reluctantly. The prosecutor froze, not expecting pushback. The laughter in the room faded, replaced by a few curious stares. I opened my folder, pulled out a printed timestamp from the surveillance footage. Your Honor, I moved to suppress the footage on grounds that it lacks chain of custody documentation and was obtained from a privately owned convenience store without a proper subpoena. The judge paused. That is technically correct. The prosecutor's face twitched. We have verbal consent from the store owner. I cut him off. Respectfully, which is not equivalent to a court-issued warrant for evidentiary use under Michigan v. Thorne. 2011. Murmurs now replaced laughter. Someone in the front row leaned forward. The judge rubbed his chin, motioned to suppress. Granted. That is when it happened, the shift. The air in the courtroom grew still. No more giggles, no more side eyes. Just disbelief. A teenager who should not have known the difference between hearsay and habeas corpus had just outmaneuvered a state attorney. I could feel the prosecutor's ego unraveling as he reached for the next piece of evidence. We still have Officer Danvers' statement, Your Honor. I interjected. I call for a dismissal of the testimony on grounds of conflict of interest and prior misconduct. The judge looked puzzled. What misconduct? I reached into my binder and pulled out a printed article. Officer Danvers is currently under internal investigation for falsifying testimony in a previous case. It is public record and under Brady v. Maryland. The prosecution is obligated to disclose any evidence that might impeach their witness's credibility. They did not. Gasps. Audible gasps. The judge looked at the prosecutor, his tone turning sharp. Is this true? The man stammered. It was not relevant to this, it is now. The judge snapped. Motion to strike Officer Danvers' testimony is granted. Jones. Anything else? Yes. Your Honor. I walked slowly to the projector and displayed a screenshot from a live stream of the protest. It was time-stamped 10 minutes before the police cruiser was vandalized, and in that image, me sitting inside a diner 5 blocks away, in full view of the camera, with a receipt to prove it. Exhibit alibi. The silence was louder than the laughter had ever been. The judge leaned back, stunned. The gallery was frozen. The prosecutor sat down. Speechless, I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move for immediate dismissal of all charges. He did not say a word for several seconds. Then, case dismissed. All charges dropped. My knees nearly buckled, but I stood tall. I did not smile. Not yet. The judge finally looked me in the eye, the smirk gone. Jones. Where did you learn to litigate like that? I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out a laminated card, walked slowly to the bench and handed it to him. The State Bar of Michigan, I said quietly. Certified attorney, as of last month. His hands trembled slightly as he held the card. You passed the bar, yes. Your Honor, I said. At 16, a collective gasp spread like fire through the room. One of the attorneys in the back stood up. disbelief. The bailiff's mouth hung open. The prosecutor dropped his pen. And finally, I allowed myself to breathe. They thought I was just another poor, black kid who did not know the system. What they did not know was that I studied the system, because I knew it would never study me. They thought I walked in that courtroom alone. But I walked in with every unjustly accused teenager, every single mother who worked overtime to buy her son a second-hand law book, every kid who has ever been told he did not belong. I belonged here, not as a defendant, but as a defender of truth. As I walked out of the courtroom, my mother stood at the back, hands over her mouth, tears streaking down her cheeks. I hugged her, tight, and for the first time since they arrested me. She smiled. They mocked me when I walked in, but when I walked out, they stood and they clapped. I was not born into greatness. I was born into struggle, into a one-bedroom apartment where the walls were thin and the hope even thinner, into a world that did not expect much from me except maybe a mugshot. I am Elijah Jones, just a kid from Detroit, the kind of name they forget unless it is printed on a docket or spray painted on a mural after a tragedy. But I never wanted to be remembered that way. I just wanted to matter while I was still breathing. My earliest memories are of my mother's hands. Calloused, blistered, but gentle. She worked double shifts at Sest, Mary's nursing home, came home with feet so swollen she could barely walk. Yet she never missed a chance to read to me at night. Baby, she used to whisper, brushing my curls with tired fingers. You have got a mind sharper than any blade. Don't let this world dull it. I held on to those words like scripture, because when the power got cut off, when there was not enough food for both of us, and she lied and said she was not hungry, those words were all I had. School was not a sanctuary. It was a battlefield. Teachers did not see me. They saw a statistic, a low-income black boy who probably would not make it to 18. He is smart, but he does not apply himself. They would write. Never mind that I was working nights, bagging groceries, to help mom with rent, or that I stayed up reading law blogs on an old phone with a cracked screen because the public library closed too early and our Wi-Fi got cut. I did not raise my hand in class, not because I did not know the answer, but because I was tired of being ignored when I did. But there was one teacher, Mayor Callahan, white man, former civil rights attorney turned civics teacher, with a limp from a protest baton to the leg. He saw me, not just the skin or the neighborhood or the permanent bags under my eyes. He saw me one day after class. He handed me a book. You ever think about law? He asked. I shook my head. Law does not think about me, I said. He smiled. Maybe not, but that is why you are needed. That book was Thurgood Marshall's biography. I read it cover to cover in 2 days. Then I read it again. The idea stuck, not because I dreamed of a courtroom, but because I was sick of watching my friends disappear into one. Raven got 10 years for possession first offense. Tasha got sent to juvie for defending herself in a fight. My cousin Deshaun died with his hands up and no one went to jail. The system did not care, but I could care enough to understand it, to beat it at its own game. So I studied, quietly, relentlessly. While my peers were out trying to escape the world, I was in my room trying to decode it. I found online lectures, legal forums, scanned PDFs of law textbooks. I memorized case law like lyrics. I practiced arguments in the mirror. I taught myself Latin terms before I ever stepped into a courtroom. Nobody knew, not even my mom. I wanted to show her with action, not words. She had already heard enough empty promises in her life. Then the bar exam. I found out Michigan did not have a minimum age requirement to sit for it, only prerequisites. I enrolled in an online prep course under a scholarship program for exceptional minors. I passed the practice tests with near-perfect scores. The day of the real thing, I put on my church shoes, rode 2 buses downtown, and walked into that building with every ounce of fear stuffed in my pocket. 6 hours later, I walked out with a certainty in my chest I would never known before. The letter came 2 months later. Thick envelope. Embossed seal. I held it in my hands for 10 minutes before opening it. Congratulations, Ma. Jones. We are pleased to inform you. I did not read the rest right away. I ran outside, barefoot on cracked concrete, and screamed into the sky. I passed. Elijah Jones passed the Michigan bar exam at 16. But I did not go viral. No headlines. No parades. Because I did not tell anyone. What good was a certificate if the people I loved were still being railroaded? I had to wait. I had to strike at the right moment. And then came the false accusation, the vandalism charge, the mugshot. My mother weeping in the hallway outside the station. That was my moment. People thought I chose to represent myself because I was arrogant or foolish. No, I did it because I needed the world to see, to hear, to feel what it meant when a kid they wrote off stood taller than the courthouse that tried to bury him. And I did stand, alone at first, but each objection I made, each motion I filed, I could feel my ancestors beside me. Harriet, Malcolm, Thurgood, even the friends I would lost to injustice, standing behind me like a choir of ghosts whispering, "Speak for us." Now, the courtroom no longer scares me. It is not a place of power, but a stage. And I have the script. I am not just Elijah. I am not just a boy from Detroit. I am a weapon forged in poverty, pain, and perseverance. I carry the law in my bones and my mother's prayers in my blood. And I am just getting started. It started with a knock. No, it started with the way they knocked. That angry, demanding slam against the wood that tells you they did not come to talk. My mom dropped the pan she was holding. I froze mid-step on the faded carpet. Then came the shouting. Elijah Jones, step outside with your hands visible. Through the living room window, red and blue lights danced across our peeling walls. Our entire street was awake, porch lights flickering on like judgmental eyes. I turned to my mom. She looked terrified. "Done T-move?" She whispered. Let me talk to them first. But I would already open the door. 3 officers stood their badges out, hands near their holsters. They did not say hello, didn't ask questions, just grabbed me. No Miranda rights. No explanation. One pushed my face against the brick, while the other snapped cold metal around my wrists. My mom screamed behind me, "He is just a kid. What did he do?" But they did not answer her. They did not look her in the eye. To them, I was not a boy. I was a file, a problem, a suspect. And my only crime was fitting the description. I did not resist. I did not speak. I did not cry. I just memorized every detail, the way Officer Klein avoided eye contact, the tight grip on my elbow, the smell of cheap aftershave in the back seat of the cruiser. I remember how cold the holding cell was, how the metal bench bruised my back when I tried to lie down. They left me in there for hours. No phone call. No lawyer, just silence and fluorescent light buzzing above me like a broken promise. When they finally brought me into the interrogation room, the air felt like syrup, stale, thick with assumption. Across the table sat Detective Wallace, late 40s. Buzz cut, sharp jaw, eyes like dull knives. He smiled without warmth. "We know what you did, Elijah. We got you on tape." I tilted my head. "Tape of what?" He leaned forward. "You were at the protest last Saturday." "Right? No." "You sure about that?" "Positive. I was at a diner all afternoon. I have the receipt." He laughed, like I would told a joke. "Well, funny thing is, a cruiser got its windows smashed about 2 blocks from that diner. Someone caught a blurry video of a black male in a hoodie. Roughly your height and build. You own a black hoodie, Elijah, like every other teenager in the country. Right? And you have posted anti-police sentiments online before, have not you?" I blinked. "I posted about George Floyd. That is not anti-police, that is pro-human." He did not like that, his mouth twisted. "Look, kid, you do not want to make this harder than it has to be. If you just confess, we can probably get you a light sentence, maybe community service." I leaned forward, my cuffs clinking against the table. "Confess to what?" "Being black within a 5-block radius." That is when he dropped the smile. "You think this is a game?" I did not answer. I did not need to. I would seen this movie before, and it never ended well for kids like me. Later, they let my mom in. Her eyes were red. Her voice, hoarse, "Baby." She whispered, stroking my cheek through the bars. "They are saying some serious things. You sure you were not anywhere near there?" I looked her in the eyes, hurt blooming in my chest. "Mama, I told you, I was eating pancakes at Ruby's. I even left a tip. Ask the waitress." She nodded slowly. "They want to give you a lawyer." Said no one picked up. That is when I knew I was on my own. So I made a decision. Then I will be my own lawyer. She stared at me like I would lost my mind. "Baby, you can tea. They will destroy you in court." I reached for her hand. "No, Mama, not this time. They think I am stupid." "Let them. That is how I will win." They released me on bail 3 days later. The media had not caught wind yet, but word had spread in the neighborhood. Some believed me, some did not. He must have done something. I overheard someone say in the corner store, "Cops do not just arrest you for no reason." I wanted to scream, but I did not. I went home, opened my binder, and started preparing. That night, I sat in our cramped kitchen with highlighters and case law spread across the table like a war map. I watched trial recordings, studied objections, wrote out my cross-examination strategies, while other kids played video games. I learned how to dismantle hearsay. I did not sleep. Couldn't he? The fear kept me awake. but I turned it into fuel. The first pretrial hearing was when I got my first taste of how little they respected me. The court clerk laughed when I said I was representing myself. The judge rolled his eyes. "Let us not waste the court's time. Jones," he said, "do you understand what a preliminary hearing is?" I nodded. "Yes." "Your Honor, it is an evidentiary hearing where the burden is on the prosecution to establish probable cause. I have filed a motion to exclude their video evidence on grounds of improper acquisition. I have the paperwork right here." His expression froze for a second. Then he cleared his throat. "Very well. Proceed." But it was not just the court. It was everywhere. The officers who sneered when they saw me walk in wearing a tie. The other defendants who chuckled in the hallway. The prosecutor, Mayor Holland, who called me kid every time he addressed me, like I was not standing 3 feet from him with a bar-certified ID in my pocket. I wanted to shout it, to wave it in their faces. But I waited. I let them mock me. I let them dig their own grave with their assumptions. Because I knew the truth would hit harder if it came from them. If they laughed at me with their whole chest before realizing the punchline was themselves. My mother cried every night. Thought I could not hear, but the walls were thin. I heard her whispering to God, asking him why her son had to carry this weight alone. And I wished I could answer her. I wished I could tell her it would all be worth it. But even I was not sure yet. All I knew was this: they would accuse the wrong boy, and they would pick the wrong fight. They thought I would fold, that I would panic once I saw the courtroom in full hardwood panels. Suited professionals, the smell of formality and quiet condemnation. They thought I would crack the moment I opened my mouth, maybe fumble over a legal term, or forget a court procedure. They thought I would stand there, a poor, black teenager with trembling knees and no degree, and prove them right. They were wrong. I was not scared of that courtroom. I had grown up in a place much harsher. I spent the week before trial hiding in plain sight. No fanfare. No drama. Just long nights in the library with stale coffee and stacks of legal journals, sometimes studying until the janitor turned off the lights. I watched trial footage on my cracked phone screen, slowed it down frame by frame, how the defense stood, how they phrased each objection, how the best lawyers did not just speak law. They commanded the room. I practiced in the mirror, memorized my rhythm, timed my pauses. I knew every word I would say before I said it. But to them, I was just a kid. Holland. The prosecutor barely made eye contact during pre-trial. "You sure you do not want to take a plea?" he asked with a rehearsed smirk. "Couple 100 hours of community service. A record sealed if you stay clean for a few years." I knew the trick. Offer me something safe, so I admit guilt, so they could wash their hands clean without admitting they were wrong. I looked him dead in the eye. "I am not pleading guilty to something I did not do." His smirk faded. "Then I hope you are ready to lose," he said. I just smiled. "Are you?" The public defender watching nearby raised an eyebrow. "Kid's got nerve," he whispered to another clerk. I heard it. I did not flinch. Nerve was not what I had. It was purpose. At home, my mother watched me wear down like a candle. She wanted me to sleep, eat, rest. I wanted to win. I would tape flashcards above my bed and quiz myself before falling asleep in my clothes. I learned how to cite Brady. Miranda. Terry. I studied the evidence law section so hard I started dreaming about Rule 403 in my sleep. I memorized my own arrest transcript, every word the officer said, every corner they cut. Still, the world thought I was bluffing. One night, just 3 days before trial, my mom brought in a tray of food. I had not asked for grits, baked chicken, and sweet tea the way I liked it. She set it beside me, then stood silently at the table. "Elijah," she said, "you do not have to prove anything to anyone." I looked up from my notes. "Yes, I do," I said quietly. "They do not think kids like me belong in that courtroom unless we are in cuffs. I need them to know they are wrong." She walked over, placed a hand on my shoulder, then show them. "Not just for you, for every boy they never gave a chance." I nodded. I did not cry. I would run out of tears years ago. The day before trial, I went down to the courthouse not to file motions, but to observe. I sat in the back of courtroom 4 and watched how the judge interacted with defense attorneys. I studied his tells when he leaned forward, when he interrupted, how long he allowed objections to linger. Every detail mattered. I took notes, not just of facts, but of people, because court is not just about law. It is about knowing who is in the room, how they think, how they move. Outside, in the hallway, I overheard 2 officers chatting by the vending machine. They were talking about me loud, like they did not care if I heard. "That is the John's kid, right? Thinks he is some kind of genius." The other laughed. "Probably just watched a few courtroom dramas. He is gonna get eaten alive." I did not say anything, just kept walking. Let them think what they wanted. Underestimation was my weapon. The night before trial, I ironed my only good suit, the one we would bought from a thrift store 2 years ago for Easter service. My mom had patched the lining last week. I stood in front of the mirror and practiced my opening statement. I did not need a fancy tie or a degree to be a lawyer. All I needed was the truth and a voice strong enough to say it. At sunrise, I walked into that courthouse with my binder in hand and a fire in my chest. Reporters were not there. No cameras. Just another minor case on the docket, until it was not. I saw Officer Danvers in the hallway, flanked by 2 other cops. He glared at me like I was an insult to his authority. I looked back at him and said nothing. His silence told me more than words ever could. The courtroom buzzed with mild interest. People had heard. That is the kid representing himself. Some laughed. Others looked curious. The judge looked annoyed, but I did not care about their faces. I cared about the facts. When the judge called my name, I rose. Elijah Jones. Representing myself, I said clearly. There was a pause, just a flicker of surprise. Then, "Very well. State your opening." I stepped forward and took a deep breath. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," I began, "I stand before you not because I trust this system, but because I refuse to let it crush me. I am not here to entertain. I am not here to waste your time. I am here because I was accused of something I did not do, and I will prove it piece by piece, word by word, truth by truth." The room went quiet, and in that silence, I knew they were finally listening. The courtroom had never felt colder, not because of the air conditioning or the stone-faced expressions, because of what hung in the air. Doubt, thick, Heavy, unspoken doubt, the kind that clings to your skin like smoke. I stood there at the defense table, straight-backed in my thrift store suit, hands folded over the binder I had spent months building, pages worn. Corners bent, but full of every case, every clause, every statute I might need. Across from me, Holland was already smirking. "Let us begin," the judge said flatly, and the prosecution took off like a sprinter. "Your Honor, Holland announced, addressing the court like it was a performance and not someone's life on the line. "The state will prove without a shadow of a doubt that the defendant, Elijah Jones, did in fact commit acts of vandalism against law enforcement property during the protest of June 4th. He paced slowly, placing photos on a digital projector, blurry stills of a black figure in a hoodie, grainy surveillance with no timestamp. A cracked cruiser windshield. We have video evidence. Eyewitness testimony. And motive, I did not flinch. He moved to his first witness. Officer Danvers, the same man who had shoved my face into brick, the same man under internal investigation for falsifying evidence in a previous case. The moment he swore in and sat down, I watched his shoulders shift, the twitch, the blink, the way his fingers tapped against the chair. A liar rehearsing his lines. The prosecutor began. "Officer Danvers, can you confirm that you saw the defendant at the scene?" "Yes, sir." Danvers replied. I recognized him from prior community encounters. Did he engage in any suspicious behavior? He was near the vehicle shortly before the damage occurred. Hoodie up, hands in his pockets. Was there anyone else nearby? Not that I could see. I stood. "Your Honor." Permission to cross-examine. The judge nodded. Mildly intrigued, I stepped forward, no papers in my hands, just memory and purpose. "Officer Danvers, you say you recognize me from prior encounters. Can you name one?" Danvers blinked. "Well, I have patrolled his neighborhood before." "Have you ever arrested me?" "No." "Ticketed me?" "No." "So you remember my face out of a crowd during a chaotic protest despite never having a one-on-one interaction with me?" He shifted. "Well, yes. I mean, he stands out. Because I am black." Objection. Sustained. The judge barked, but the silence that followed was louder than the gavel. I kept going. "Officer Danvers, are you currently under investigation by Internal Affairs?" Holland shot up. "Irrelevant." "Your Honor, credibility of a witness is directly relevant to the veracity of their testimony, especially if he has been accused of manufacturing evidence in prior cases." The judge hesitated. Overruled. Proceed. Danvers stammered. "That investigation's ongoing. Nothing has been proven." "Were you required to disclose that investigation when offering testimony under oath?" He did not answer. "That'll be all." I returned to my table, and I saw at the shift. The audience was not laughing anymore. Some leaned in. Some whispered. The bailiff gave me a new kind of look. not condescension, but curiosity. Then came the video footage. Holland played the clip. Shaky, dark, filmed from across the street. A figure in a hoodie approaches the cruiser. The camera shakes. The window shatters. The figure runs. No facial detail. No identifying marks. Your Honor. I stood. I moved to exclude this video on the grounds that it was obtained without proper chain of custody and lacks time, location, or verification of authenticity. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have precedent? Michigan v. Thorne. 2011. Evidence must be verifiable to be admissible. He turned to Holland. Do you have a certificate of authentication? The prosecutor fumbled his papers. Not currently, but... Motion granted. Video is inadmissible. Another shift. I could feel it now, the heat rising. Holland's cool demeanor began to crack. His questions lost rhythm. His confidence unraveled, and finally, when he tried to rest his case, I stood. I have something to present before my closing arguments. I said. The judge sighed. Jones, if this is about reiterating points. No. Your Honor, it is about establishing standing. I walked slowly to the bench, reached into my pocket, and pulled out a laminated card. My hands did not tremble. I handed it to the bailiff, who passed it up to the judge. He read it, squinted, then read it again. This, he muttered, this is a Michigan Bar Association attorney license. Yes. Your Honor, I said calmly, issued 2 months ago. You passed the bar. At 16, under Michigan law, there is no minimum age for examination. I qualified under independent study standards and passed with distinction. Gasps echoed through the room like dominoes falling. The courtroom gallery erupted into murmurs. Even Holland's jaw hung slightly ajar. I do not believe this. He muttered. The judge looked stunned. You are telling me this entire time you have been a licensed attorney? Yes. Your Honor. I replied, which means not only did I represent myself correctly, I did so with full legal standing. Every motion I filed was valid, every objection proper, and every step of the prosecution's case violated my rights and relied on assumptions, not law. The silence that followed was not hollow, it was holy. One reporter in the back, who had slipped in late, reached for his phone. The courtroom clerk dropped her pen, and across the gallery, my mother, my beautiful, tired, atching mother stood with one hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes shining with a pride so big it could be knocked down the walls. The judge cleared his throat. I believe I speak for everyone when I say, this is unprecedented, Holland. Do you have anything further? He did not. Then this court finds Elijah Jones not guilty on all charges. Case dismissed. Jones. Counselor, this court recognizes your status and your extraordinary presentation. I did not smile. Not yet. I turned toward the crowd, eyes sweeping across every doubter, every whisperer, every person who had labeled me a joke, a thug, a lost cause, and I held their gaze. They underestimated me. That was their first mistake. The next morning, everything felt different, but not for me. For them. The court. The system. The ones who used to smirk when I walked in with my binder clutched to my chest now looked at me like they did not know what planet I came from. The gallery was not full of silent skeptics anymore. It was packed with reporters, students, even a law professor or two. The headline had broken overnight. 17-year-old Elijah Jones reveals bar certification mid-trial courtroom erupts. Suddenly, the kid they mocked had become something more dangerous, a mirror to their arrogance. But I did not let it distract me. I had not come for attention. I came for justice. And the war was not over. The court resumed session at 10:00. Sharp. The judge, now visibly more careful in tone and posture, looked at me with something new behind his eyes, not sympathy, not respect exactly, but caution. Counselor Jones. He began, "You may proceed with your presentation." Holland sat stiffly at the prosecution table, every inch of him trying not to show how much last night snooze had rattled him. His tie was tighter, his hair more styled, but his arguments, they were unraveling faster than he could contain them. I stood, voice calm, my binder open to the first tab marked inconsistencies. Your Honor, the prosecution has repeatedly implied that I was seen at the scene of the crime. They claim Officer Danvers identified me, and that a vague video implicates me further. But we have already established that the video is inadmissible due to improper chain of custody. So let us address the next cornerstone of their case. The testimony. I walked slowly to the evidence screen, clicking to display Officer Danvers' bodycam footage retrieved through a FOIA request I had filed 2 weeks earlier, anticipating this moment. This footage, I said, begins 15 minutes after the vandalism occurred. At no point does it show him observing me. In fact, it shows him arriving on the scene after the incident. There is no visual confirmation, no timestamps that align with the alleged act. I turned to the jury. We have no proof I was ever there, but that is just the beginning. Next, I presented Exhibit C, a receipt from Ruby's Diner, time-stamped 3:27 p., along with security footage showing me sitting at the counter. Mid-bite, at the exact moment the cruiser's window was shattered. As you can see, I said, tapping the screen, I was 5 blocks away, eating waffles and minding my business. The timestamp syncs with the GPS time of the cruiser incident provided by dispatch logs. Holland objected. This footage was submitted last minute. We have not had time to review. Objection to the objection, I said coolly. All evidence was filed in accordance with court deadlines. Page 4. Timestamped. Filed with court clerk at 8:32 Monday morning. The judge checked the file. He is correct. Objection overruled. The prosecutor's jaw clenched. His confidence, like his case, was bleeding out. But let us take it one step further. I said, the core of the state's case rests not on what I did, but on who I am. Their entire narrative hinges on the belief that a kid like me, poor, black, from Detroit is more likely to commit a crime than to walk into this courtroom as a licensed attorney. Their belief was not built on evidence. was built on assumption. I turned to Mir. Holland, you never asked who I was. You assumed. You thought I would roll over. You bet everything on a stereotype and did not bother to verify your facts. He stood quickly. This is theatrics. I cut in. This is truth. The judge raised a hand. Let him finish. I continued. In the absence of any credible evidence, with all critical elements of the state's case either suppressed or dismantled, I hereby move for a directed verdict of acquittal. There is no case left. The courtroom fell quiet. For 10 long seconds, the judge said nothing. Then, Counselor Holland, do you have any further evidence to present? The prosecutor, now pale, simply shook his head. Then the motion is granted. All charges against Elijah Jones are dismissed with prejudice. A beat. Then 2. Then applause. It started with a single clap someone in the back. Then another. And another. The judge tried to quiet the gallery, but the moment had grown too big to contain. My mother was crying again, but this time, she was smiling through the tears. She stood up slowly, hand pressed to her chest like she could not believe what she was seeing. Like maybe she would wake up, and it would all be gone. I walked to her through the sea of reporters. Flashing cameras and stunned faces. She hugged me so tightly I could not breathe. You did it. She whispered, you did it, baby. But I was not done. As the noise died down, I stepped back toward the podium one last time. Your Honor, I said, I would like to formally request the court begin an investigation into the conduct of Officer Danvers, the evidence handling procedures of the precinct, and the patterns of racial profiling involved in arrests made on June 4th. There it was, the twist they never saw coming, because I was not just there to defend myself. I was there to shine a light. The courtroom cleared out slowly that afternoon, but the story refused to leave. It clung to the marble floors, to the echoes of my voice still reverberating in the rafters. I could feel it in the way the bailiff looked at me, no longer with contempt, but uncertainty, in the way the court reporter's hands shook slightly as she filed the final page. The whole machine, once so confident in its routine, had skipped a beat, because I was not supposed to win. I was not even supposed to fight, but I had. And now, I was pulling the curtain all the way back. The morning after my acquittal, I walked into the offices of the Detroit Chronicle with nothing but a manila envelope in my hands. I was not there for an interview. I was there to blow the doors off a system that had quietly crushed people like me for decades. Inside that envelope were affidavits, officer disciplinary reports, redacted statements I would obtained through public court requests, and a sworn declaration I had written myself naming names, dates, and the specific methods used to target kids from my neighborhood. The editor, a short woman with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes, looked at me like I was a walking headline. "You are the kid from court," she said, the baby-faced lawyer. I nodded and slid the envelope across her desk. "This is the real story," I told her. What happened to me was just the tip. She opened it, skimmed the contents, then looked up. Her voice dropped. "How long have you been building this?" I shrugged. "Since the day they put cuffs on me." She published the expose the next morning. The title blazed across the Sunday front page. The Pattern of Power. How Deep Detroit Falsified Evidence and Targeted Youths of Color, a bar-certified teen uncovers the truth. The city ignited. News vans parked. Outside the precinct, protesters gathered in front of City Hall. Politicians who had never stepped foot in my neighborhood were suddenly issuing statements about justice and accountability. But I was not in front of the cameras. I was still in the community, at Ruby's Diner, shaking hands with people who once crossed the street when they saw me coming. In church basements, holding free Know Your Rights workshops for teens who looked like I once did, wide-eyed, silent, scared. Within a week, Officer Danvers was placed on unpaid suspension, pending a formal investigation. Then Internal Affairs released a statement admitting they had overlooked prior allegations due to insufficient follow-up. That was legalese, for we did not care until the world started watching. The police chief held a press conference denying any institutional wrongdoing. But the public did not buy it. They had receipts now. And I had lit the match. Holland tried to go underground, but it was too late. Turns out, my request for court-ordered review of his conduct triggered something deep. A review board found 3 separate instances where he had withheld exculpatory evidence in prior juvenile cases. One of those kids was still locked up. His name was Leo Hernandez, 16 years old, no prior record, convicted after a plea deal when footage that could be cleared him was mysteriously lost. I reached out to his mother personally. "We are going to get him home," I told her. And I meant it, because once you start pulling a thread in a system built on silence, everything begins to unravel. Some praised me, called me a prodigy, a revolutionary, a symbol. But the truth is, I was just a mirror. I had not created this system. I would just dared to stare into it longer than most. I did not want awards. I did not want fame. I wanted change, and change came slowly, painfully, but it came. One night, after a long day of reviewing case files and press requests, I sat with my mom on our tiny porch, the same porch where I used to dream in silence, where I once whispered to the stars about being more than a file in a cabinet. She passed me a cup of tea and said, "You know what scares them the most?" I looked at her. "You, free, educated, loud, and not alone anymore." She was right, because now I was not alone. Law students started messaging me, asking how they could help. Lawyers from across the country sent support, offering mentorship, connections, resources. Even Thurgood Marshall College Fund reached out, inviting me to speak. But the most powerful moment came from a boy no older than 12, who stopped me outside a corner store. "My brother told me you beat the court," he said, wide-eyed. "I want to be like you." I knelt down and looked him in the eye. "No," I said. "You are going to be better." That night, I pulled out the bar it again laminated, unbent, shining. I had shown it to the world. But more than that, I had shown them what it meant. Not just knowledge, not just law, but the will to rise when everything says stay down. The truth hurt them. It shook them. It dragged their secrets into daylight. And now, they could not unsee it. Power does not fall in silence. It falls in chaos, in press conferences that start too late and end too soon, in email leaks and panicked voicemails, in the thud of a badge hitting the desk and the rustle of resignation letters slid across polished tables. That is how it started the collapse, not with one dramatic blow, but with the cracking of the dam, piece by piece. And I watched it happen, not from a distance, but from the front row. After the Chronicle expose, City Hall tried to play defense. The mayor gave a speech on the need for unity, but he avoided saying my name. The police chief launched a voluntary review board filled with hand-picked allies. But the public was not having it. Protests grew daily, not just in Detroit, but Chicago, Oakland, Atlanta. My case had struck a nerve, because people did not see just me, they saw their sons, their daughters, their neighbors, their students, kids who were one bad stop away from being erased. Within a week, Officer Danvers was stripped of badge and gun. Not quietly, not with grace, but with cameras flashing, his face plastered on every screen. Turns out, my research had barely scratched the surface. Internal Affairs opened over 15 new investigations, linked to him cases of excessive force. Coerced confessions. Tampered footage, some dated back nearly a decade. The union tried to defend him. They failed. And then the prosecutor cracked. Holland, who once smirked at me like I was a child swinging in a man's arena, was forced to resign. It was not just my trial. It was Leo Hernandez and Dominique Gray S. and at least 3 others I never met, but whose names I now carried like war medals. He lost his license. The state bar conducted an ethics hearing and deemed him unfit to practice. I did not celebrate. There is no joy in someone's fall when it came at the cost of so much stolen time, so many wasted lives. But accountability, that felt different, that felt necessary. With Danvers gone and Holland disgraced, the narrative shifted. Reporters stopped calling me the teen prodigy and started calling me something else: activist, legal reformer, disruptor. Even politicians started using my name in campaign speeches. One senator from Michigan said, I was proof that the system works when young voices hold it accountable. I laughed when I heard that, because what I proved was that the system did not work until we broke it open. Then came the offers. Universities, scholarships, TV appearances. One morning, I got a call from a Washington, D.C. number. A congresswoman wanted me to fly out, speak at a justice reform summit. Another call came in later that week from a state senator offering me a position as a youth policy advisor. You have got momentum, Elijah, he said. People listen when you speak. But I did not want to speak. I wanted to build, to tear out the rot brick by brick, and rebuild something that could not be twisted against us again. Still, part of me was overwhelmed. I was 17. I still lived with my mom in a 1-bedroom apartment where the paint peeled from the ceiling and the heater wheezed in winter. But now I had meetings with people who used to walk past us like we did not exist. I would never flown on a plane. I would never even left Michigan. But suddenly, the weight of a movement was on my shoulders. And yet, I did not feel crushed. I felt clear. One night, I was invited to speak at a town hall in East Side, Detroit, my side of town. I walked up to the stage wearing that same thrift store suit, binder in one hand. The lights were hot. The room was packed: teachers, students, janitors, mothers with babies bouncing on their hips. I looked out into the sea of faces, many of them still bruised by the system. And I told them everything, not just what happened in court, but what it meant, how silence is permission, how law can be used as both weapon and shield, how we need to teach our kids not just how to stay out of trouble, but how to speak when trouble comes. When I finished, they stood not in applause, but in understanding, in unity. That meant more than any newspaper ever could. Back home, I received a letter that made my hands shake. It was from Thurgood Marshall College Fund. They were offering me full tuition, mentorship, and a spot in their accelerated pre-law program. We believe you represent the next generation of civil rights leadership. The letter said. My mom cried for 10 minutes straight. Not quiet tears, ugly, soul-cleansing sobs. I never thought we would see this day. She whispered. I held her and said, we did not see it, Mama. We made it. But even with the victories piling up, I stayed grounded. I still walked my neighbor's dog for a few bucks. I still visited Leo Hernandez's mom every Sunday, helping her navigate legal filings to appeal her son's conviction. I did not forget. Couldn't forget. Because the collapse of power is not an ending, it is a vacuum. And if we are not careful, the same power just shifts faces, changes voices, finds new ways to do the same old harm. So I stayed present, eyes open, binder full, voice steady. They tried to bury me in a system that fed on fear and silence. But now that system was caving in on itself. Because truth, when spoken with courage, does not just set you free, it knocks down walls. Justice got me out of court, but purpose kept me from walking away, because once the trial ended and the applause faded, I realized something deeper. What happened to me was not rare, it was routine. A system that runs on assumptions and intimidation does not stop just because one kid outsmarted it. I did not want to be an exception. I wanted to be a doorway. That is why I did not cash in my story. I did not sell the rights to a TV network. I did not sign a book deal. I turned every offer into a question. How many kids are sitting in cells right now because they did not know what a Brady violation was? How many mothers are crying into their pillows because no lawyer would take their baby's case seriously? If the answer was not zero, I knew I had more work to do. So I started something. Quietly, with no fancy office, no legal team, just a laptop, a rented desk in a shared community center, and a notebook I labeled J Project. The J stood for more than just Johns, it stood for justice. Juniors. Journeys. It started as a resource guide, downloadable PDFs explaining basic constitutional rights, checklists for parents whose kids had been arrested, templates for filing complaints. But it grew. Word spread. Suddenly, teenagers from all over the country were emailing me. They pulled me over and did not tell me why was that legal. My friend confessed, without a lawyer can we do anything. I could not fix everything, but I could teach them how to fight back. Then came the calls from youth centers, one in Cleveland, another in Baltimore. They asked if I could speak, not as a guest, but as a guide. So I flew out first time on a plane. Took a deep breath as we ascended through the clouds. Binder still in hand. Suit still the same. I stood in rooms full of boys with tired eyes and girls who held rage in their fists and told them, "You are not who they say you are. You are not a problem to be solved. You are power waiting to be awakened." That is when the foundation offers came. Grants, partnerships, NGOs wanting to collaborate. I was cautious, because as not all help is honest. Some want your voice, but not your truth. Some want your face, but not your fire. I made sure every dollar went to impact, not image. I built a team, a few law students, a retired public defender. My high school teacher, Ma Callahan, volunteered too. Together, we created First Line Defense, a grassroots initiative pairing trained mentors with at-risk youth navigating the legal system. Within 6 months, we would help 26 kids avoid wrongful detention. Got charges dropped in 12 cases. Reopened 5 juvenile records. One of those was Leo Hernandez. We filed for a post-conviction appeal, citing prosecutorial misconduct in light of Holland's disbarment. I sat with his mother the night before the hearing, reviewing affidavits with her on the kitchen table. She kept staring at me like I was a ghost. "You brought my son hope," she whispered. "That is more than any lawyer has ever done." But there was more. I returned to my old high school one cold Friday morning. Same cracked steps, same broken clock in the hallway, but this time, the principal greeted me like I was someone. I stood in front of the senior civics class, same room, where I first learned the Bill of Rights. I looked at those kids, slouched and half asleep, and told them what no textbook ever had. They are counting on you not knowing your rights. Don't give them that luxury. When I left, 3 students chased me down in the parking lot, asking where they could study law early. I gave them all copies of my binder. The original. That night, I sat on the porch again with my mom. She sipped her tea. I stared at the stars. "You ever think about being a judge someday?" she asked. I chuckled. Maybe, but right now, I would rather make sure the next Elijah Jones never needs one. Because this was not just about me anymore. It never was. It was about the system that almost swallowed me, and the kids it already did. The ones who did not have the tools, the voice, the time, the binder. I carry them with me now. Every courtroom I walk into, every article I write, every life we save from another wrongful conviction, I carry them. I used to think justice was the end goal, but now I know it is just the beginning. The stage was smaller than I expected. Just a raised platform in the middle of the auditorium at my old high school, surrounded by folding chairs, balloons sagging at the corners, and a podium with a missing corner panel. But to me, it felt bigger than the Supreme Court. The banner overhead read, Elijah Jones, youngest bar-certified attorney in Michigan history. I stood behind that podium, not in a suit I borrowed, but in one I bought fitted. Charcoal gray, stitched by a tailor who called me sir without hesitation. And yet, none of it felt as heavy as the moment my name was called, and the room stood up. It was not the standing ovation that got me. It was who stood. My teachers. The janitor who used to sneak me extra time in the library. My mother. Front row, wearing a white dress she would saved for a day that matters. And behind them, rows and rows of kids who looked like me, young, hungry, underestimated. I did not need a national spotlight. I did not need medals. This was my courtroom now, and I had something to say. I was not supposed to be here. I began, not behind this mic, not wearing this badge, not holding this title. I reached into my coat pocket and lifted the bar-eyed. The light caught its corner, and it gleamed like a truth no one could deny. When I walked into a courtroom as a defendant, no one saw me as a lawyer. When I opened my mouth, they braced for mistakes. When I said I would represent myself, they laughed. A hush fell across the room. But I was not asking for permission. I was exercising a right. And the only difference between me and the kids still sitting in cells they do not belong in is that someone finally listened. I turned to the students. You do not need a title to speak truth. You do not need a podium to make change. You do not even need approval. All you need is conviction and the courage to carry it when no one else will. They did not clap right away. They just stared, wide-eyed, like someone had given them permission to breathe a little deeper. After the ceremony, the governor of Michigan shook my hand. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked if I planned to run for office. I said, not yet. They asked if I would join a major firm. I said, maybe later, because none of that mattered in comparison to what happened next. 3 weeks later, we opened the Elijah Jones Legal Access Center, right in the heart of East Side Detroit, not in some skyscraper, in a repurposed community church. The stained glass windows were cracked. The parking lot was uneven. But inside, we had whiteboards, free legal clinics, pro bono attorneys on call, and kids as young as 14 signing up to shadow paralegals. We did not charge. We did not discriminate. We did not ask for suits. Just stories. People walked in broken, angry, scared, and we gave them tools instead of pity. One morning, a mother named Denisha came in holding her son's hand. He was 12, arrested for disrupting class after he told his teacher she could not search his backpack without cause. They said he was aggressive, but the truth, he had been watching my trial on YouTube. He learned the word unlawful search from me. We got the charge dropped. A week later, that same boy came back with 3 friends and asked, "Can we get books to learn this too?" I handed them all copies of the People's Constitution and promised that next summer we would start free weekend legal literacy courses. They cheered, like I would handed them superpowers, and maybe I had. On the anniversary of my acquittal, I returned to the courtroom where it all began, not as a defendant, not as a lawyer, as a guest of honor. The judge, yes, that judge invited me to speak at a judicial seminar on youth legal advocacy. He introduced me with a tone that had softened. There are moments in a career that humble you. He said, "Ma, Jones was one of mine." I nodded respectfully, not with pride. With peace. Because this was never about revenge. I did not want to embarrass them. I wanted them to see us. To see the brilliance that blooms under pressure, the fire that injustice can never snuff out, the truth that no title, no robe, no badge can bury forever. Now, when I walk into a courtroom, they do not ask me if I belong. They ask where I want to sit. I chose the back row that day. I sat beside a kid named Malik, 15, facing a curfew violation charge. He clutched his intake papers like they were chains. I leaned over and whispered, "They do not get to decide who you are. You do." He looked at me, hopeful, and I knew, deep in my chest, that the work was just beginning. Because I am not just the youngest attorney in Michigan. I am the first of many. They mocked him. They doubted him. They tried to define him by the color of his skin, the neighborhood he came from, the silence they expected. Elijah Jones did not just defend himself, he redefined justice for an entire generation. From a courtroom filled with laughter to a nation listening in awe, Elijah proved one thing. You do not need a title to have a voice. You do not need permission to change the world. All you need is the courage to stand up when everyone expects you to sit down. He was not just the youngest attorney in Michigan. He became a symbol of resilience, of knowledge, of what happens when truth refuses to be quiet. The lesson: your voice matters. No matter how young you are, no matter where you come from, no matter how loud the world tells you to stay in your place, stand. Anyway, learn, speak, lead, because justice does not live in courtrooms. It lives in every heart that dares to say, enough. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you believe in the power of standing up, do not let it stop here. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful, true-to-life dramas. Comment below with your thoughts. What part hit you the hardest? Share this with someone who needs a reminder. They are stronger than their circumstances. Together, let us build a world where every voice matters, one story at a time.